Good morning, everyone. Good morning. I'm Peter Michael Pruzan Jorgensen. I'm Vice President with BSR. One of the pleasures I have is to oversee our work on partnership development, working with bilateral agencies, multilateral agencies, NGOs, and of course also business to promote and advance the Millennium Development Goals. I'm really pleased here to have the opportunity to open the last day of this conference. But as we all know, the last day is also the beginning of the new. And hopefully it will be a new day where you will take back some of the insights from the past few days and move even faster forward with that insight. Our next speaker is one that moves fast forward, I can assure you that. It is also a speaker who's passionate and very courageous. He's rapidly opening up for us into new critical and much needed partnerships between business and government. Earlier this week, Aaron Kramer said that BSR was based on the idea that business had much to offer the world and the world has much to teach business about making a difference. I still think that holds true today. What has changed, however, is a growing recognition that business has a lot to offer governments and development agencies in addressing the world's large problems, and that these very same agencies can be terrific partners for business in advancing their own goals. Our speaker is an embodiment of that, and you will learn more about that. No one in this room, I think, will question that the challenges that we face as embodied in the Millennium Development Goals require a partnership between business and government and other stakeholders. If you just think about the Millennium Development Goals of end poverty and hunger, environmental sustainability, universal education, or if you think of it in broader terms such as the need for an inclusive economy, the need for better management of our future resources and sustainable growth, no one is left with the illusion that this can only be handled by government or only be managed by business. Throughout the week, we have had several references to the need for this type of partnerships. Yesterday, IKEA's Steve Howard spoke about the success of Better Cotton Initiative, an initiative that would not have happened without the collaboration with government. Maersk Group spoke about the need for coalition building with governments to protect human rights and business interest in Myanmar. And we have heard conversations about the food, energy, and water nexus, possibly the most critical nexus that we are facing today. And again, business and government need to be part of that. Our next speaker is a firm believer in these types of collaborations, and more so, he sees the need for and is willing to take the risk associated with trying new and innovative partnerships. This is a very critical point. We need to innovate, we need to develop new solutions. And even better, he is in a position where he actually has the power to make it happen, and has done so for a number of years. Dr. Raj Shah is the administrator of USAID, and for those of you who do not know USAID, it is the US government's bilateral development agency. He directs the passion and skills of more than 8,000 professionals across 80 missions across the world, and they're all dedicated to addressing the global challenges that we are facing. Under his leadership, USAID continues to be a leader in public-private partnerships. I heard this morning that up to 1,600 public-private partnerships has been forged over the years, much more than I ever anticipated, and I do think that makes USAID a leader in this space. These partnerships leverages the talent, the expertise, the innovation, and resources of the private sector to tackle global challenges. He's pioneering new partnerships, strengthening existing ones, and redefining the way that the agency works around the world today. He's responsible for dramatically expanding the range of private sector partners for USAID, and in particular those with a strategic interest in serving the needs of the most vulnerable. For instance, Rajiv Shah spearheads President Barack Obama's landmark Feed the Future initiative that seeks to address the food security and nutrition challenges across numerous countries, not least in Africa. And he played a key role in increasing business participation in the G8-led New Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition, a significant commitment by the G8 nations. And another initiative, Mr. Shah had led the launch of the USAID's Every Child Deserves a Fifth Birthday campaign. This is a program to educate Americans on the disparity in child survival rates and make them more aware of our incredible capacity to save children's lives by leveraging the resources, the skills and assets of government and business. A key component of this initiative is obviously private partnerships, of which many have been formed, and Mr. Shah has played a key role in this. As a token to the partnership between BSR and USAID, we couldn't help noticing that Mr. Shah was a little bit ahead of us when he coined the phrase USAID Forward for the internal business model evolvement at the USAID. We then adopted it and put a FAST in there. I don't think it makes a big difference. I do think it serves the same purpose. We need to innovate and evolve the way that we work. I could say a lot more about Dr. Shah, but I will not keep you in the waiting. I'm sure you will like to hear him rather than me talk about him. So please help me in welcoming Mr. Dr. Shah.
Good morning. Thank you. Thanks very much. Thank you, Peter Michael, for that overly kind introduction, and good morning to everyone here. Thank you for coming out so early. It shows your commitment to this important topic. I want to thank Aaron Kramer, the president, of course, of BSR, and his team. Peter Michael, thank you for your leadership and for making this all happen. Nancy Wildfear Field, thank you for your service at USAID and now at BSR. What a great example. And I also want to recognize some members of my own team. Maura O'Neill, our Chief Innovation Officer, who has done outstanding work in helping to lead the transformation of USAID. Chris Juergens. Chris, could you put your hand up so folks see you? Whom, if you want anything later, you should talk to Chris, because he's very talented and also able to facilitate partnerships and leads that effort, and Rob Schneider, amongst others. I want to note that so many of our partners are represented in the room today, and I thank you for your commitment to the overall task we jointly have to end and eliminate poverty, extreme poverty and suffering around the world. Now, it is genuinely wonderful to be in a room with people who understand that if we're going to succeed in the task of ending extreme poverty and suffering, we will only do so through partnerships with big telecom companies like Cisco, important financial institutions like JP Morgan and Citi, partners in food security and global health like General Mills, Cargill, and GlaxoSmithKline, and, as this photograph illustrates, a partnership with Walmart that is helping to source product for their Central American stores from small-scale farmers, in this case in Guatemala, whom I had a chance to meet, and who told me that the introduction of this partnership has not just transformed their welfare and improved their incomes, but now their entire community was moving out of poverty. And when I asked them what they next needed to do better in the context of this project, I thought they would say better farm implements or other kinds of agricultural support, and they asked for schools, because now for the first time kids were leaving the farm where they had been working, and they now wanted to go to school. That's the sustainable pathway out of poverty that you have the power to produce for communities all around the world. And 20 years ago, when BSR was founded, I imagine a gathering such as this one would have fit in a much smaller room. I know what it was like at that time. And the fact that you are so prominent today with offices all around the world and partnerships in so many different communities is a testament to both your success, but also the movement that you're a part of. Your work with software companies to implement human rights approaches, agricultural processors to help them improve their sustainability, reach, and connectivity to the very poorest small-scale farmers, and importantly, factory workers to help them improve their basic living conditions, often through pretty straightforward health interventions, is making a huge, huge difference. And we look forward to expanding partnerships with you based on the fundamental concept you've been discussing through the context of this conference, that success at reaching real scale, at getting beyond the pilot projects and small examples of wonderful, heartwarming philanthropy, requires engaging the business element that you represent. And it requires bringing businesses and entrepreneurs, development institutions and governments, philanthropists and scientists, all to the same task of eliminating extreme poverty. For years, USAID has focused on engaging private enterprise in our central mission. And that is the mission to eliminate extreme poverty and suffering from the farthest corners of the globe. We've formed over 1,600 partnerships with over 3,000 private sector partners, most of whom have been small-scale, local private sector partners that often are the engines of growth and development in their communities. As a result of these strategic interactions, we're now helping to link 10,000 smallholder chickpea farmers, including this one, in Ethiopia, to PepsiCo's East African supply chain. By engaging in this kind of a partnership, they will actually be producing a chickpea-based food product that will work in commercial markets, be sold as hummus in their commercial markets in the region, but will also be fortified and packaged in special, long-lasting packets that can target children and women for distribution by the World Food Program in the very region that so many of us know has become a chronic story of famine, hunger, and extreme malnutrition, especially for kids. Those kinds of local solutions are the kinds of solutions that can break free of the challenges we face today and create the kind of impact at scale we all aspire to bring about. I'd like to offer one such example. Last year, as you know, a devastating drought in East Africa led to about 12 million people being acutely food insecure. And for the first time in a number of years, we actually had a real famine on our hands. And of course, a famine is a measure not of food access, but of a rate of child death on a daily basis that is so acute and so high that we label it a famine. Now, in this context, the famine was caused by conflict and drought superimposed on each other. But it was also caused by the fact that small-scale farmers, who were the most vulnerable populations in that area, whether they were in very arid communities and relied on livestock or otherwise, were precisely the people who were hit the hardest. And one shining example kept hundreds of families from requiring urgent assistance in that context. In this photograph, you see small-scale farmers in southern Ethiopia and northern Kenya who were the part of a pilot program with Swiss Re. And they were actually getting climate-indexed weather insurance payments through the drought because Swiss Re could calculate that, in fact, through this pilot project, that their insurance conditions had been triggered. And those payments kept their communities afloat through the cycle of drought and kept them in their communities away from the camps where people had to go when they needed urgent assistance. Those kinds of partnerships can make a tremendous difference and over time can position a company like Swiss Re to be providing basic insurance products to hundreds of thousands of new customers all around the world. As a result of these types of engagements, we have been able to create change at scale. Our Development Credit Authority, which is designed to use loan guarantees to unlock local sources of capital, has approved 38 new partial credit guarantees just last year, mobilizing a record $700 million for small-scale entrepreneurs around the world. It costs the American taxpayer $1 for every $22 that's leveraged using this kind of a mechanism. That's smart foreign aid, and it's smart foreign aid that's generating important results. In this case, in the past year, those results reached more than 1 million people, as more than 140,000 small businesses benefited from loans and investments enabled by USAID's partnership with the private sector. It means this gentleman in this photograph was able to expand his poultry farm in Ethiopia, building his own feed processing plant and constructing an additional barn. And it means that other small entrepreneurs in Dar es Salaam, not far from there, were able to hire new entrepreneurs, open new stores, and sell more products. These are not partnerships for partnership's sake, and these are not acts of charity or giving. These are true market linkages that can deliver profits for companies here and abroad and deliver economic opportunities to help countries and communities move out of a cycle of extreme poverty. And most importantly, the private sector, by engaging the private sector in a win-win partnership, we believe we can sustain and expand these results long after foreign aid and assistance goes away. Because as President Obama has said repeatedly, the purpose of our aid is to create the conditions where it is no longer needed. We actually aspire, unlike most, I think, federal agencies, to put ourselves out of business over time, as we have successfully done in places like South Korea and Chile in the past, and as we are doing right now by shutting down 14 of our missions, 25% of our individual program units, and concentrating our efforts where we can get the most actual results for every invested American tax dollar. Now, why do we do this? We do this because we're not there yet. Because today, as you all have this important meeting, 870 million people will go to bed hungry. 1.2 billion people will be trapped in extreme poverty. Today, 19,000 children under the age of 5 will die. And the great majority of them will die of incredibly simple diseases that are cheaply and easily prevented. Today, as a new drought rages across Western Africa, we know that 19 million people there suffer now from acute food insecurity, hunger. And we know that the average age of marriage for girls is 14 and going down in Niger, as young girls in families that are impoverished are literally being sold into marriage or slavery so that families can get by and have fewer mouths to feed. This is happening today. And we know that the effort to eliminate extreme poverty is central to our national security and our future economic prosperity, just as it is a central tenet of expanding our sense of moral commitments and moral justice all around the world. That's why President Obama elevated development as part of our foreign policy and as part of our national security strategy. It's why we've introduced a new model of approaching the tackling development challenges. It's a new model based on a greater degree of partnership and engagement, especially with private enterprise, because we know that even as we highlight the challenges, 6 of the 10 fastest growing economies in the world are in sub-Saharan Africa, and if we don't engage and compete there, others will. It's a new model that engages science, technology, and innovation far more deeply as the driver of change and progress, because we know that a global emerging middle class that today is poor, but will not be in 10 or 15 or 20 years, is the future of our own economic strength and our ability to create business models and business products that serve that community is going to determine how prosperous America is 20, 30 years from now. And it's an approach that demands far more from others, because ultimately the drive to eliminate extreme poverty must be shared, in particular by local leaders and governments, if it is to be successful. There's perhaps no better illustration of this in our portfolio of work than the new Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition that President Obama unveiled last May at the Camp David G8 summit. We recognize, as we pursued the task of ending hunger through effective agricultural development, that despite all the progress that's been made and all the expanded investment going into sub-Saharan Africa in particular, almost none of that was driven into the private sector in production in agriculture or processing in agriculture over the last decade. The numbers were very, very meager. And when we reached out to global and local firms and asked why, the answers were pretty consistent. Fear of corruption, ineffective and unsteady policy environments, and critically, a lack of access to donor programs and partners who knew the context and who could mitigate those risks. As a result, we reorganized our work and started bringing donors and private sector companies and developing countries and leaders together to say, how can we jointly take actions to move beyond the current challenge? The premise was simple, but the results speak for themselves. President Obama was able to announce at Camp David a new alliance that is aiming to move 50 million people out of poverty and hunger in 6 sub-Saharan African countries. We were able to point out in each country that countries would make tough policy reforms and commitments to transparency, to women's right to land access and tenure, to limiting and eliminating export bans which strangle potential investment in agricultural production in those settings. And simultaneously, more than 60 companies have now made commitments of nearly $4 billion to invest in these countries in agriculture for the purpose of reducing hunger, malnutrition, and extreme poverty. And donors will commit to work in a more coordinated way to facilitate the kinds of partnerships that make a difference. Partnerships with companies like DuPont, that's moving forward with their commitment to strengthen their maize business activities, producing more seed, selling it to small-scale farmers, and reaching 32,000 smallholder farmers to double their incomes. Companies like Tanseed, a smaller, local Tanzania-based provider of seeds and agricultural products that aims to raise the incomes of 1 million people in just 3 years by concentrating in the southern agricultural corridor of that country. And at the same time, we followed up aggressively with the countries themselves to ensure that they're implementing the tough policy commitments they made at the G8. And we're proud to say that across the board, they are making that progress. So we know that this new model can work. And we know that it can be applied to such a broad range of large-scale challenges that we can actually come together and seek to eliminate extreme poverty. That's why we're proud to announce today a new partnership with DevEx called DevEx Impact that will facilitate the expansion of these types of problem-solving arrangements and public-private partnerships. Together, we will combine the world's largest development network, DevEx's 500,000 professionals, with USAID's on-the-ground capacity in more than 80 missions around the world, to engage the private sector on large-scale efforts to eradicate and eliminate poverty and suffering. I urge you to contact Raj Kumar or Maura O'Neill, both of whom are here, to explore more how you could be a part of that type of partnership. I'd like to highlight one specific opportunity that I know this community is poised to help address. Over the last few months, we've traveled around the United States and met with business community in Miami and Clemson, South Carolina, Berkeley in California, and Detroit in Michigan. In all of these and other settings, one opportunity has consistently stood out as one that we should try to take on together. And it's the effort to transform banking and financial access systems from traditional systems in countries that don't effectively reach lower income populations and women to more modern electronic and mobile systems that do. We know that there are 2 billion people that remain unbanked around the world, and we know that many of these individuals are already using mobile phones to connect in so many other ways to the rest of their economy. We believe there's an exciting opportunity to create new leapfrog systems of mobile banking and mobile payments that can help transform development opportunities around the world. That's why we've come together to launch an effort we call Better Than Cash. an effort that engages countries and companies like Vodafone and Citi and others to create these new payment systems and to move people into that environment. I'd like to give you just one example. In Afghanistan, we have struggled with coming up with ways to fight corruption in the context of how civil service employees are paid. And some of those employees are part of the security forces, are part of the police, and are critical to our ability to bring our troops home safely. So we're working with Afghanistan and a range of partners to create mobile payment systems. And in pilot programs with the Afghan police, we've found that police officers who started getting paid on mobile systems instead of through the traditional model of trusted agents carrying them the cash, thought they were getting a 35% raise by being in the pilot program. They started coming to work. They started being active. They started doing their jobs. These types of solutions can make a tremendous difference, not just for the economic prosperity of the countries in which we work, but for our own national security, for our own fiscal stability, and for our own capacity to be part of a safe and globally integrated world. So if you're in an industry where you could work in this setting, we ask that you join us. Join the Better Than Cash effort, and let's do the best we can to really move hundreds of millions of people onto these types of systems so that they can be part of a new future. You know, I joined USAID determined to bring a business-like focus on results based on the premise that if we can deliver great value to the American people in how we spend our tax dollars, they will support us to do more in this area of work. And for the last few years, many of us in development have continued to spend tremendous energy on improving our core effectiveness. And it's working. We're choosing to do smarter things, focusing on key competencies and appropriate roles. We measure relentlessly, inviting cold, hard facts to challenge our warm, fuzzy assumptions. We become hard-nosed in the pursuit of sometimes soft goals, and in doing so, we've often invoked the ideal of how they do it in the business world, how they do it in the private sector. Well, I recently had a chance to meet with several business leaders and CEOs, and I set out to take notes and learn about what they're doing now that we can copy and implement in our world in development so we can be more effective and more results-oriented. And what surprised me in those discussions is the central and powerful place of some exceedingly soft ideas that today's best CEOs are pursuing. Forging common purpose and shared values, meaningful work, building bonds of respect across categories of people. A sense of being part of something bigger than oneself. These deeply personal and important issues are what today's best CEOs believe create value and create competitive advantage. Ford Motor Company was turned around by a CEO who asked his executive team to stand in front of his Ford's dealers and auto workers and chant, "I love you," in a large group public environment. You know, development attracts many of the best students, best minds, and strongest spirits. But we need to be sure that we constantly refresh, discuss, and deepen, and celebrate the sense of shared and higher purpose that brought us to this work and to this task in the first place. If we do, I believe we could spend less time thinking about how to sell development and development partnerships, either to the American people or to corporate leaders or members of Congress, and more time broadening the base of people who care deeply about the challenge of ending extreme poverty, both because it's an expression of their moral commitment and because it helps them achieve their own corporate or political objectives. Perhaps to genuinely solve our global challenges, to end extreme poverty, to leverage social networks to deliver real democracy and fight corruption, to ensure that every child survives and thrives well beyond the age of 5. Perhaps we need to both elevate development in the Situation Room of the National Security Council, in the boardrooms of corporate partners around the world, and in the hearts and minds of millions of Americans who want to find meaning in this work and in our lives. Thank you. Thanks very much.